Good morning. Thank you, Anouk, for organizing this session and inviting me. And thanks, Laura, for your wonderful introduction. You said that's where the work is, and a better description maybe of what proficiency means in literacy and in the other domains. So I'm going to start from here and share a piece of ongoing work that we've been doing with some of the members of the PIAAC Cycle 2 Literacy Expert Group. I wish I could thank all the people who are participating actually. This is ongoing work in this project, but I will not have time to, but I want to mention the participation of Anne-Britt and Tobias Richter, who are both members of the group, and actually helping out framing this follow-up piece of research. What we're trying to do is to make the most of the data and content analyzing the whole set of units that have been used in the cognitive assessment in literacy as part of PIAAC 2 in order to exactly elicit what drives difficulty, not just across levels, but on a continuous scale, right? So just a few words about the definition of literacy in PIAAC Cycle 2. It's defined as accessing, understanding, evaluating unwritten texts in order to achieve one's goals. And I will stop here because this issue with goal is, I think, of utmost importance. If we want to understand what people can or cannot do with text, we need to understand why they need to engage with text, with what kind of mindset and goals. And well, these goals are very diverse, obviously. When you look at people reading out there in Mannheim or in any city, they read for all sorts of purposes, and the tasks that we implement in the PIAAC study are meant to be a representative sample of what people would do with texts, whether at work or in their private life or for civic participation or what else. And so reading is necessary not just for specialized jobs, but for any kind of occupation. It's also needed to shop in the supermarket or about everywhere, because this is the information society. This means that there's written information everywhere around us, and we need to be able to use it, right? Regardless of our level of education or training or proficiency. Of course, reading is also needed in specialized jobs, like, for instance, being a renowned theorist of psychological development. This is Jean Piaget working at his desk in the 50s, and obviously using a lot of printed materials to do what he was doing at the time, which he was writing papers. And so we have a whole range of abilities and also amounts of materials to be dealt with. All right, how do we unravel this? Well, over the past 25 years, there has been a growing awareness that reading is not just about text, it's also about tasks. And so we have now a number of frameworks to play with. This diagram is borrowed from Catherine Snow and her group that issued a very interesting report at the beginning of the 2000s, stating that reading does not occur in a vacuum. Reading is socially contextualized, and it's about activities that people perform and for which they need to turn to texts as a resource, right? This is a starting point. And more recently, together with Anne-Britt and Amanda Durick, we have sort of tried to define an analytic framework that we call Resolve, to understand how goals turn into reading acts and strategies for using text. So what do we have? For now, we have the proficiency scale. So Laura gave a few examples. And traditionally, both in PISA and in PIAAC, they are made of these narrative paragraphs explaining what the skills are at each level. And this has been a source of frustration to me as an expert, because there is a lot more to say about proficiency. And of course, having it in a nice table in the report is helpful, because most readers are, in a rush. They may not feel that they need extra details. So this is the way it has always been. But I think it's important to try to go a little bit further and to try to dig into this description of skills to actually find out what drives difficulty, which also means what defines proficiency, right? It's one and the same question. So we don't have a metric, to my knowledge, to actually characterize the drivers. We can describe them. We can say that people can read longer text or make more complex inferences, but this is all qualitative, and we don't measure these things in the strict sense. Even though some work back then in the 90s by Peter Mosenthal and Erwin Kirsch attempted to do that based on the US national study, but it was never done with PISA or the PIAAC materials. So that's what we try to do after we met in 2024, reviewing the results from PIAAC Cycle 2 and trying to describe these proficiency levels. We followed up by content analyzing each and every item in the literacy domain. And so trying to think, okay, where are the drivers? How can we further characterize them and measure them, so to speak? So if I would ask you, okay, what drives difficulty? It's about reading. I guess most of you would say, well, the text is a driver. Yeah, sure, that's true. The text has features that can make reading easier or more difficult, okay? But in our framework, this is, of course, not enough. We also need, as I just said, to take into consideration that there's a reason for a reader to want to read that text. This is the task, and the task may also have its own features that define difficulty, right? In other words, sometimes reading is difficult for reasons that have nothing to do with the text. It has to do with what people are trying to do, which is intrinsically difficult. But then this is still not enough. There is also something called an interaction between the task and the text. Sometimes the tasks align very well with that text. The text is most helpful. You can solve it entirely. But in other cases, there is a mismatch. For instance, information you're looking for is not explicitly written in that text. It could be explicitly written in another text, but not in the text you're reading. And that's when you need to draw these inferences and reason about the information. All right, so we have a three-term. And because I'm not good in numeracy, this is why we called it T-square. But that's for Dave to correct me in his presentation in a minute. All right, let's start. So I'm going to briefly review these three sources. I'll be very quick with this, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the question. What's a text as a source of difficulty? Well, this is the shortest unit in PIAAC. I cannot show it to you because it's confidential. This is why it's blurred here on my slide. It's a simple text of 21 words. Obviously, it fits on a page, and it has a single author, right? And this is now the longest unit in PIAAC literacy. There are 3 pages, 818 words, and 4 different people talking to you in these texts, all right? So there's a number of things that we could define based on this comparison. Length is a factor. Why is length a factor? Because readers have to persist. There's more information, so it's more cognitive processing. It's intrinsically more effortful, right? And there's also more opportunities to get distracted or to get the wrong information because there's more to use. But length is not, of course, the only factor. There's also the complexity of language that we know how to measure with some proxies, like the very well-known readability formulas. They're there for a purpose. If we use them, we get some information. The flesh, the simplest, is actually the best for our purposes. Complex language makes it more difficult for reasons that I don't even need to explain here. Multiple sources add an extra layer of difficulty. And multiple sources are everywhere. When you open your favorite social network or browse the internet, you're faced with multiple sources of information. So they decrease cohesion because different sources will not give you the same level of language and don't discuss the topic in a cohesive way, right? So this added difficulty compared to reading a single source. All right. I'm going to try to be good and keep within my time. But this said, our assumption is that we don't explain the item difficulty just with this kind. What I just said about text is everywhere in the reading literature. This has been known forever. So what we try to do is to complement it with an analysis of tasks. Why would some tasks be more difficult than others? This is very easy to illustrate. These are not actual PIAAC items, but because I needed to show them to you, I invented items that could be in the PIAAC study. So you're looking at a timetable. Just think, when you came here, you know, trains, whatever, flights, and you ask yourself the following question. Which train goes to Kassel, Germany? Click one of the 4 responses below. That's a task. Okay, you could have this timetable and then think, how am I going to do that? Now look at this other task. It's very similar. Consider the timetable to the right. You're visiting your best friend in Paris or in Castle. Assuming that you want to leave on a Saturday on or after 9 a.m., that you don't want to arrive after 2 p.m., and that you can spend a maximum of €100, rank the 3 itineraries below from the most optimal to least optimal. I'm telling you, this is very similar to an actual item in the PIAAC task. And everybody can feel intuitively how that one task, regardless of the text, might make it more difficult to a reader to come up with the right question. All right? At this point, I can see Dave and Samuel frouncing and telling me, well, come on, this is my domain, this is numeracy. And Samuel would go, well, this is problem solving. And I want to say, well, yes, there is some overlaps. We define domains because it's practical. It's like the levels on the scale. They are practical, but they are fallacious. Domains are fallacious, that's my take. It's pretty radical. But I think that Dave and Samuel, well, they may contradict me, I don't know. We need to really face it. There's a lot of cases when the difficulty of a literacy task is because there is some problem-solving component in it, and or because there is some numeracy in it. That's a fact. It's present in the PIAAC data. So these high correlations are not spurious. They're there for theoretical reasons that we, I think, further need to think about. OK, I'm going to skip that. And I will finish with another range. What we discovered with the expert group was that once you've done this, you're still not explaining the full complexity. We also need to look at the matching between the task and the text. You could think of a text that would make my difficult task very easy to do. But in most cases, it's not going to be easy because the text was not meant to answer that particular question. The text was meant to answer a range of questions, and you have your own question, and that's how it's difficult, all right? And then we defined another whole bunch of drivers. This is not published. Some of it is described in a report that we will comment tomorrow, right, Dave? Tomorrow morning, that was sponsored by the ETS, and in which we describe some of it. But it's ongoing work. So we have things like, does the text support finding information for your task? So the presence or absence of text structure or the relevance of text structure for your task. This would be considered interaction between the text and the task. You cannot describe this if you don't know the task and you know the text. And we have a range of them. So we reviewed the 80 items, and we rated them on each and every of these parameters. There's 9 parameters in our model. Currently, there could be more, there could be less. We're trying to define a rubric that anybody could use to describe any literacy task and place it on a scale from simple to complex. And then, based on this work, we just calculated a simple correlation with the actual difficulty of each and every item on the PIAAC literacy scale. We used the simplest possible polynomial, which is a simple unweighted sum calculated for each item. There could be better approaches, but this is, for a low numeracy person like myself, this is about the modeling I could understand. And this is what we get. It's actually amazingly powerful. Our 9-parameter linear model predicts 68% of the variance in the PIAAC literacy item difficulty, as you can see. It's not exactly linear. Probably we need to play with second-order equations there, but we're kind of happy that we can have the description now doesn't fit in a single table. It's going to fit in 10 pages, but then we know what we're talking about. We have the difficulty of items right there described for each and every important parameters. And maybe more important, it could be applied to other tasks as well. And that's how we could see that maybe some parameters will be missing because we don't describe the load in numeracy or the problem-solving nature of the tasks, right? But that we can talk later. So with this ongoing work, we have a linear equation that predicts item difficulty. Good. We don't know if some criteria matter more than others. We need to play with these parameters. Our initial model is just, we're just playing. We need to get into more detail. We are checking about internal consistency and weighting. We're also checking on rating reliability. That's actually step one. We did this as part of the expert group working. We knew these items by heart, each and every, because we've been working for several years together with the test developers, with the ETS team. And so we are not blind to difficulty. We are now having in the US and Germany groups of people who are blind to actual difficulty rate the items. That's the real test of whether we have a usable rubric, okay? That's my second point. And then we could extend it. We are actually extending this approach to PISA material. We have 114 items from the PISA 2018 study, and we are doing the same with apparently the same outcome. So again, accurate and usable. And okay, hopefully in a couple of months we will have a paper describing all this. And if it's reliable and valid, I think it could inform things like how do you train adults into getting over these sources of difficulties that we have now identified more precisely. And with this, I thank you. Hopefully I didn't go over my time. Thanks, Anouk.